Hello, everyone. Good to have you for our last class. I cannot believe it's been 8 weeks. Hopefully, we're all feeling good about the test. We're definitely going to cover a lot tonight. So, we will do a full review. And if you guys have specific questions, things that you're worried about, things that you're unsure about, feel free to put them in the chat. Either I'll answer them right away, or if there's a point when it kind of slots in nicely, I can kind of do it that way. But I hope everyone's feeling good about it. I did look at some practice test scores for everyone, and it looks like there's some nice improvement. And so that's a good sign. And I tend to find that people actually even do better on the real SAT than they do on the practice tests, mostly because if you stick to the plan, when that adrenaline is going, that can be really powerful. It just gets you hyper focused and really you yeah, just move fast and confidently in a good way. So we'll talk about different things to watch out for on the other end of that spectrum, things like being overconfident. But generally speaking, you guys are prepared. You've done some practice tests. You know what it's going to feel like. Maybe you've taken the real test as well, so you know that. Um, I'll put this stuff at the beginning because I think it's important, and anyone who watches the recording will want to make sure they get this. But remember, the portal here is great for practicing. You can also remember to chat me if you have specific questions. I would also be checking this tomorrow, checking this on Friday, because I'm still working on some last minute little cheat sheet resources. So I will post them here when they're ready. I actually have a printed copy of one of them right here. It's on grammar. So that'll be here. So just check in with this. As far as other things that you should be doing, let's go to practice. Today we are talking revisit and refresh, right? We're talking about revisiting old topics, refreshing our memories on some things that we might have forgotten, some obscure rules, formulas, things like that, that we know are going to come up. And so a lot of what we're going to do today is stuff we've talked about before, and I'll try to put it in that larger context. We'll do some easy questions, some hard ones, and different topics. But I think this is also the motto for you guys after today is don't try to overextend yourself. If there's some obscure topic you haven't seen before, then don't worry about it. At this point, if I haven't talked about it, if you haven't encountered it, doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. That's if it comes up in the test, that's unfortunate, but it's one question. So there's nothing that we've missed that's going to be a big deal. So you don't want to start diving into crazy hard geometry questions if that's not your thing. Don't stress yourself out with that. This is mostly about going back to things. So if you click the revisit and refresh page in the portal, you will see that a lot of the stuff for you should already be filled out. These are exercises you've done before. So these are also ones that I find are very important to do again. And so if you've got anything that doesn't have a great grade, you might want to try it again from scratch. Remember, you can always do that. Or you can even just go back and look at the ones you missed before, ask yourself if you get them wrong again, watch the videos again, all that stuff. I will highlight this one, this 10 SAT traps. This is one of the best things I ever made. It is very good. That is something I definitely will suggest you prioritize and do one more time before the Saturday test. It's just a good reminder of different things that could show up on the reading and the math. And those are literally traps that are very common that you are very likely to see again. But they're also just reminders of the idea that there are traps on the SAT and that you have to keep that in mind. And I do think that when people do have trouble and they get a worse score on their real test compared to their practice test, a big reason for that is for some reason they stop thinking about the traps and the potential for traps. So reminding yourself of that is really important. I would also remind you, or actually, this is not a reminder so much as a kind of newish thing. If you are on step 10 and you go to quizzes, you will see a single quiz, the test day checklist. You should do that before you actually take the real test. I will put that in the little homework thing at the beginning here as a reminder, but this is pretty good. Do all 10 questions. It's a reminder about some of the basics. Things like doing the check-in. Remember on Blue Book, you have to do a check-in. You have to log in and check your ID. They make you confirm your information, make sure that Blue Book is updated and all those things. So you need to do that before you go to the test center. So that's something you could even do tonight to knock it out. So that's part of this checklist. There's also other things that you want to make sure you're doing, like gathering your pencils, making sure your calculator is charged, making sure you have a photo ID ready to go. Every single time I've taken the SAT, both as a teenager and as an adult, there is always someone racing down the hallway of the school frantically trying to meet their parent to hand them the photo ID that they forgot. Every time, literally without fail, everyone, there's always one person who, for whatever reason, does not have their photo ID. So make sure that is ready and packed on Friday night. Do not wait and try to find that Saturday morning because you might be the person who can't find it Saturday morning. So that is an important Friday night thing. So there's a couple other things in that test day checklist just to remind you of, but it is a good thing to make sure everything is in order. And we'll talk a little bit later about what you should expect on the day and all that stuff. But if you have any questions now about the kind of logistics here, that's fine. Let me know. But that is pretty much going to cover the important stuff. Questions, feel free to chat me them. Okay. Yes, go.
Okay, I guess it's a weird question. Like how they added a bunch of questions to the
Hmm.
question bank, and everyone's saying like about unit circles, and you have to know the unit circle. Is that true or not?
No, I saw the stupid TikTok. I think there might be multiple TikToks, but I saw one. Someone sent it to me. I don't know who he is, but that is not okay. That someone 2 days before the SAT is trying to scare the hell out of you about some topic that is not going to show up on your test. So here's the thing. Yes, that's a real question. The unit circle, in a sense, could come up. But remember, the unit circle is just the special angles. It's 30 degrees, it's 60 degrees, it's 45 degrees. It's the special triangles. So in most cases, if they talk about the unit circle, they're just putting a triangle inside of a circle. So it's probably going to be about one of these, right? The unit circle is a distraction. The real topic is special right triangles. The particular question that I've seen in that TikTok isn't even about that. It's about radians and just the idea that radians kind of circle around a circle. And so it's not a question you're likely to see. I'm glad you asked it. I was curious if anyone would. But yeah, it is not something to worry about. If you are worried about it, guess what we've got? Exercises, geometry. Starts with an R, radians. There you go. That's all you need. So yeah. Does that answer your question? I hope it mostly just puts your minds at ease.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, is that I'm talking about the TikTok you saw, right? The one where the person's like,
Yeah, oh, you have to know this, or you're gonna get like a 600 or something like that.
yeah. When it comes to the SAT and generally anything in life, be careful of people whose main way of getting attention is to make you feel scared. You guys are prepared. If you've been doing even half of the stuff that's been listed under these steps for most of the summer, you're going to be fine. The SAT is very predictable. If you've ever watched any of my YouTube stuff, you see that I'm constantly being asked to make prediction videos. I don't know why, but it's another one of those things that people like. I hate doing it, and the reason is that it's a giant lie. There is no way for me to know exactly what is going to be on your SAT because that would be cheating. But in terms of the topics, it's the same stuff every time. It's the same 15 grammar rules. It's the same 20 or so transition words plus some extras that might show up. The passage topics don't really matter, but the traps are going to show up again and again. The vocab is a big question mark in reading. In math, it's the same few things about lines and quadratics and exponentials. And if it looks different, it's just a distraction. The real core topic is the same. Think about the questions we did last time where we looked at the way that an easy question gets morphed into a hard one. That is going to help you stay calm when you see something that you think you've never seen before. It is stuff that it's just disguised very well. So that's a good way to approach the test. I'm glad you asked that question because as you can tell, I'm a little annoyed about that TikTok. That's not good tutoring. That is not good way to prepare people for the test, is to scare them. So hopefully I will not do any of that with you guys tonight. Keep you calm and well rested. And any other questions related to that? That was a good question. And we will talk more about these kind of big picture ideas. Yeah. Well, okay, then let's do this. So basically what my plan was for tonight is we're literally going to hit a little of everything. So we'll go in the order that you're going to encounter the test. So let's go over here and you can go to your Satellivision things and I'm going to put a question in. We're going to start exactly where you should on the test, which is with grammar, right? There you go. Right, so remember the pacing strategy for the reading section is in both modules, skip right to question 15. It's probably going to be a grammar question. Look around, look at 14, look at 16, just find that first grammar question and then go crazy in there. That's where you want to go as fast as you can, but without losing accuracy, because those are going to be predictable questions, even when they're unpredictable. And I'll talk more about that in a second, but this is a pretty predictable one. I'm going to shrink this so I can see better. Okay. Uh, As you guys are thinking, I'm going to just talk a little. So remember, main strategy for grammar, predict the rule. Look at those choices first. Don't read that passage till you've looked at this and started thinking, what am I going to need to look at first, second, third? What am I testing here? This is clearly punctuation, which is really structure. And see a lot of us picking C. That is the number one choice we should pick because, or at least look at because, well, it's got a semicolon. What does a semicolon do? If you don't know by now, you are in trouble. It is a sentence before and a sentence after. Independent clause before and after. So what do? The Tough Kid genre featured stories that frequently found the gang in the same situation. Yeah, sounds like a sentence. Cool. Check. Escaping dirty, oppressive reform schools that the kids had been unfairly forced to attend. Is that a sentence? Who's escaping? What's escaping? Doesn't say in that part. Escaping also isn't really a verb that could work in the sense of the way that featured is a verb that can work. So I see a lot of C's in this answer here, but no, this is the only thing that's definitively wrong right away. That's not a sentence. So if you're thinking C, why are you thinking C? Is it because that sounds like a sentence? That's this end part? Because that might be where instinct kind of creeps in a little bit, right? We don't want to use instinct when we're answering grammar questions, but to test out whether or not something sounds like a sentence or not, that's where our instincts do matter because we all speak English. We all know what it sounds like when we say a complete thought. So hopefully you've been training that part of your brain as you've been doing the practice questions and the grammar, because that is something that's hard to make into a science. Oh, here's the subject, here's the verb, here's my participle phrase. None of that, right? We don't want to think about grammar in the way that like our grandparents studied grammar, diagramming sentences. We got to feel it out to really be sure because that's how we experience the language. So knowing that the first part of the sentence is important, but so is knowing that the second part is not. So it is not C. Now I start to think, well, what else do I have? I have these dashes, right? So hopefully we've remembered what a dash does. A single dash is going to be the same as a colon, right? And just because I'm writing, a double dash, which is a little different, is basically the same as two commas, right? So a double dash is going to interrupt the sentence, but a single dash is going to basically end it, all right? Because remember, how does a colon work? A colon is going to have a complete sentence or independent clause before, and then we have some flexibility with what comes after. So in a way, we've already proven that the dash could work, right? We've already shown we do have a sentence before, and we don't have a sentence after, but it's easy to, and basically anything after is fine. So that means that the dash could work. We can maybe also look at the comma, but I see this other comma here too is changing and after escaping. So what's going on, right? There's a comma here too. So escaping dirty, oppressive reform schools. Whenever I see commas, I'd love to identify why they're there. This one is there because this is a list of adjectives. Dirty, oppressive. So that's an okay comma. But everything else is just a continuous thought. So I don't need another comma. Escaping is not part of this list. So the answer here is going to be D. We just want to say, all right, my sentence is over. Now I've got an extra clause that's adding on. And remember, the point of a colon, and by virtue of that, a single dash, is to add on an extra information. And usually what that information is doing is it's explaining or answering a question that's implied by the first part. It's not a literal question, but it's a question that we can easily pull out of the sentence. So in this case, the Tough Kid genre featured stories that frequently found the gang in the same situation. What situation? Escaping dirty, oppressive reform schools, right? That's a good use of the colon. And by virtue of that, the single dash. Yes. So this is a good one. It's an odd sentence. It's got some weird punctuation, but those are things that if you don't feel like you've memorized as of tonight at 5:15 p.m. Pacific time, that's something to do in the next 36 hours because that is definitely going to show up in the test. You're going to get colons, dashes, semicolons, periods, commas, all that stuff. And knowing how that stuff works is entirely within your control. That we have lots of great videos, grammar. There it is. And one is just called punctuation lesson. This has some more detailed punctuation stuff, but this one's pretty good. So either of those, that easy thing to do in the next couple hours or days, and make sure you have that down. You will be tested on this, no doubt. Prediction, right? I don't like doing predictions. This is the best I can do, is that'll come up. Cool. If there's questions, feel free to interrupt with them, but let's go to another grammar one before we move on. And my hint here is something's a little strange. That's all, though. I don't think it's hard. I just think something's a little strange. All right, so same thing, predict the rule. Definitely some verbs here. But hopefully we know that's not as simple as just saying it's verbs, right? All right, if you got an answer, pick it. I'm going to reveal this time without talking so much. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. It's C. And maybe that's obvious to some of you guys, but I would say that this is a good question where you should notice something's weird, right? So remember our verb tense process. This is very important on the SAT. Is the first thing we got to check for is agreement, whether or not they are singular or plural, right? Because if that's the rule that they're testing, then all bets are off. Everything else, the tense as we think of it, the time of the question doesn't really matter. So I'd be very quickly in my head going, all right, explain is plural, have explained is plural, explains is singular, and then explaining, that's a weird one, right? It doesn't fit it. So right now I'm thinking it's not about singulars and plurals, it's probably something else. Maybe it's the to and ing rule, which remember is about sentence structure. And maybe it's that because I see an ing, but then again, these verbs are all the same format. So what's going on here? Let's read it, right? The recent breakthrough in renewable energy technologies, which involves advanced battery systems and innovative grid networks, explaining how communities can achieve complete energy independence from traditional fossil fuel sources. I can hear, like we did in the last one, that this is not a sentence. If I throw D in there, I lose the thing that makes it a sentence. I lose the verb that anchors the whole thing. So that's odd. Because then now what am I back to? I'm back to thinking about the singulars and plurals, or am I thinking about the other verb tense rule? Is it about the past, present, or future tense? Well, not really, because I don't really see anything in this that kind of tells me the tense. It's actually about singulars and plurals. And so that's why C is right, is even though normally, remember, this rule follows the 3 versus 1 pattern, we sometimes they could break it, and it's very rare. And I think, I mean, you said before the SAT, the College Board released some new questions. One of them was a question that had a similar pattern to this. This is not the same one, but it was similar in that it was blending the verb tense rules. It's a little bit of singulars and plurals and a little bit of the to and ing structure thing. And so that's odd. That's very rare. And maybe you noticed that as you were doing this, that it was hard to pin down what it was doing, but that can happen. And so the reason I wanted to show this to you is if you have been studying and you know the grammar rules especially, then there might be some things that seem a little out of the normal. And that's okay. That actually is a really good sign. That's proof that you have the stuff memorized. And so don't start second guessing the rules. Don't start just going back to what sounds good. You're going to have reasons for what you're picking. Stick to your reasons. And so in this case, the reason in the strategic sense is D doesn't work. And I've got 2 plurals and a singular. So odds are good it's probably the singular. And then it's not hard to prove that, right? We know that none of this comma clause can include the subject of the sentence. So for punctuation reasons, kill it off, right? Get rid of it. So the real subject has to be somewhere in here. Obviously, they want me to think it's technologies, that's plural, but the real subject is breakthrough. The breakthrough explains how the communities can achieve complete energy independence. And there's some twists involved. They're trying to make me think it's technologies, but the preposition in makes me realize it's breakthrough. And that stuff's helpful to know. But I think if we trust the process here, just in our strategies, we end up at the same place without needing to do all the like crazy grammar that goes with it. And so if you find some things that seem a little unusual, trust your sense. It probably means that it's just like a weird kind of version of a rule that you know very well. And so try to get back to that. I think a classic example of that is, remember, we say that a period and a semicolon are identical. So cross them both out when they both appear in the choices. But the one exception to that, right, is a semicolon can sometimes be used for lists, for complicated lists. So if you find that you're reading and you're like, wait a minute, something's off here. There's another semicolon already in this sentence. So maybe something weird is happening. Maybe it's that exception where the semicolon and the period aren't the same. So maybe you got to bring the semicolon back into the mix and actually end up picking it. So, if you've been studying, those little weird twists are going to be noticeable to you and hopefully easy to untwist and get back to something normal. Ideally, grammar, if you're looking for 700 plus in reading, grammar basically needs to be perfect. So do these questions, the transitions, right? So these would be the next ones that you're going to hit in your process through the section, right? You're going to grammar first, and then you get to the transitions. So let's hopefully remember some of the strategies we can use here. Dumb summaries being our main strategy for all of reading. And I do see some of you using it already. That's good. And if you're not using it, my bet is it's because you need to study the transition words a bit more. I'll show you how to do that, but within a few seconds of reading, this is also one where you could look at the answer choices first before you look at the passage. I'm good either way, though. But regardless, at some point in the process, you got to be going, all right, but, so, but, in other words, stays as it is. And that right there is the power of our strategy. Because if we know that nevertheless means but, and we know that said means but, it's going to be very, very unlikely that one of those is right and the other's wrong. Because if they mean the same thing, how could it be the case that one is right and one is wrong? So already you've just doubled your odds of getting it right because you should be down to two choices. And maybe you didn't quite know what accordingly meant, but if I'm telling you it's a so, then that's good for us. You can now plug that into the blank. And literally, instead of reading accordingly in here, read the sentences with so. See how it sounds, see how it feels. You have a very good instinct for a word like so. You do not have a good instinct for a word like accordingly. So, accordingly, we're going to go with our simpler version and try to tap into our instinct a bit. And maybe you remember something about in other words, but if you had no clue what was going on here, accordingly is what you should pick, because in other words is the number one wrong answer for the transition questions. Okay, it's not always wrong, so it's never something you can automatically cross out. But as we'll see as we get to the passage questions and things like that, remember, timing is going to be tough, especially in those hard modules. So you might end up having to pick an answer where you're not 100% sure, you're not 90% sure. Maybe you're placing a bet based not so much on this particular question, but on all the questions you've seen before this. And if that's what you're doing here, then in other words is a bad bet. It is very often wrong because it's very literal with what it says. It means we are repeating exactly what we just said, in other words. So if they add any idea, then suddenly it's not an in other words situation. So here it says these antioxidant compounds not only give the corn its striking blue color, but also provide enhanced nutritional benefits compared to standard yellow corn. Traditional Mexican dishes made with maize azul, such as blue tortillas and atole azul, I don't know how to say it, are valued both for their visual appeal and their superior health properties. It seems like it's saying the same thing, right? It's sneaky. Nutritional benefits, right? And striking blue color, right? Health properties is nutrition, visual appeal is color. But these are the dishes made with this thing. We've moved on, right? Here they're talking about the corn itself having this color. Now we've moved into the dishes made with the corn. So it's not the same thing anymore. It's not repeating what we just said. It's adding on to it. It's moving in the different direction. And even that little bit of advancement of the idea is too much. And so B is better. And it does make sense, right? The antioxidants give them its striking color and nutritional benefits. So the dishes made with this ingredient are valued for their visual appeal and health properties. It makes sense as a so, but it's very tempting to pick in other words because it sounds safer. It has more familiar words. Accordingly is odd. It's not something we are used to. But if you want to do something very low key and easy to do in the last few days, quizzes, transitions, these two quizzes, I think I pointed these out before, really good. The top 20 transitions, you should be getting 100% on that quiz every single time you take it. The uncommon transitions, a much longer quiz, 48 questions you can do, or just pick random five. But that is also good for things like that said, the ones that are not as common. You will see those on the SAT. But even if you just knew the top 20, you would be good for most questions. The top 20 transitions account for 65% of all the choices in all the transition questions. So this is where you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck, but it's also not that hard to do this quiz once or twice and just see the other ones. Easy win, but you got to do this dumb summary thing. Mandatory. Don't forget about that. That double crossout strategy, really useful. All right. Now we're only going to get 2, 3, 4 of these transitions in the test. Then we're going to move into those outline questions. And the whole reason we're starting with grammar is to make sure that we get to the grammar transitions and outlines with plenty of time, because this is where the easy points are. You do not want to lose points here. You want to make sure that you have enough time. You're not guessing randomly. You are taking your time here. If you guess randomly on some passages, no big deal. But we want to make sure we're getting these. So try to remember the strategy here. Mostly it involves not reading those bullet points unless we absolutely have to. So focus on the question. I'm seeing some right answers here. Did see some wrong answers, but it seems like we're starting to clean them up. I'm going to write this down. Cool. For some reason, the SAT likes to sneak in some science stuff. If you've ever seen the ACT or even heard of it, you probably know there's a science section on the ACT. That's the main thing that makes it different. The SAT has never had one, but I think that they basically sneak science in lots of ways. Obviously, we've seen those science passages, which are a total nightmare. I also think that a lot of the graph questions on the SAT feel like the ACT science. And then we get stuff like this, where even this question, as it seems, it's just about randomly giving them what they want. It is trying to sneak in this idea of science mattering, right? And so I pay attention to these kinds of questions, especially in the outlines, where when they're talking about like a different step of the scientific method, make sure that you are providing them with the step they're asking for. So a hypothesis, right? That's what they think is going to happen. The methodology is the process of the experiment itself. What did they do? What is the experiment, right? And then the result or the findings, right? That's their conclusion, right? So those are the big three kind of ways to think about a scientific experiment. And so if they ask for the methodology, you better not provide the findings, right? So if we look at the choices with just the word methodology in mind, like found is not a good sign. And that sounds like a conclusion. Both Martian moons contain a carbonaceous material, blah, blah, blah. Nope, that's a finding. OPALEX team gathered spectral data through infrared analysis during multiple surface landing missions to determine the moon's composition. That sounds like a methodology. I would keep that choice. To analyze the mineral composition of Phobos and Deimos, OPALEX team used infrared spectroscopy to examine reflected light, gathering data across multiple orbits. Sounds like a methodology. I would keep that choice. And it does not bother me that I've got two. I'll deal with that later. Let's move on to D. Before the study, scientists believed that Mars's moons formed a large object struck the planet. That sounds like a hypothesis of some kind. So that does help. When you have two choices that seem to accomplish the goal, the first thing to do is go back to the goal and just be like, is there something I missed? Is there something they want, right? That I ignored before, right? Because they might say the student wants to present the study's methodology to an audience unfamiliar with Mars. They might add this extra piece. And so sometimes there's two goals in the question. And so you might focus on one goal to start, but then you just realize there's another one that matters that separates the two remaining answers. So that's not a big deal. That's how most of these go. In this case, the sentence is so short, there is no other goal. Presenting something just means talking about it. So that's not something we can really focus on. We focused on the thing that matters. Plus, these are different answers to that question. They're saying different methods, right? This one is talking about landing. This one is talking about orbiting and whatever spectroscopy is. So now is a case where I would be like, I got to go to the bullet points. They're going to tell me. And they do say that they blah, blah, blah. It's impossible to land on the surface. And what they're using is the spectroscopy. So now I've got it. C is definitely the answer. No problems. So some of these do require you to read the bullet points, but I do not think that forces us to change the strategy. If you are finding yourself in a situation where multiple answers work, it probably means you need to go to the bullet points. But I'd say most of the time you'll just get down to one answer. The one thing you cannot do on the outline questions or on any question, reading, math, anywhere in the test, is you can't just stop at the first answer that looks good. They will set that trap. They will give you an answer at the top, choice A or B, that seems in a very obvious way to answer the question, to satisfy the conditions, whatever it may be. You can't just pick that. You have to know that trap is coming. I don't care how much in a rush you are to get to the end of the section. The other 30 seconds that it takes to read the other choices is worth it because you will get this wrong if you don't do that. So when you read everything, you might realize, oh, actually, there's multiple answers that work. So it's not just about reading everything. But when I got to B here, I also wasn't like picking B in my mind, right? I wasn't like deciding, oh, that's the answer, and then reading C and D out of just like obligation. That's very important when we get to the passages is don't just like decide too early, right? Let the other answer choices happen. You are a judge who has to hear all sides of the case before you can rule in the case. So you've got to be impartial. You can have your favorites, but you have to be in your mind able to keep them aside and really rule on the case once you've heard all the evidence. So very important for the entire SAT. That trap will be set in the hard module especially, but everywhere. They will try to lure you in with a choice A or B that are just fake. So read everything, always. Alrighty, then we'll go, right, so we've done the grammar, we've done the transitions, we've done the outlines. If you are looking for 700 plus in reading, this grammar, transitions, outlines, you're really looking to do all of that in 10 minutes. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. Usually I'm at 10, about exactly. Sometimes if there's a couple hard transitions or whatever, I might be at 11 or 12. But if you're looking to have enough time for those passages, this is what you're aiming for. But another kind of big picture idea is you don't know where the hardest questions are going to be on your particular test, in reading at least. We don't know if we're going to have a larger number of hard passages than usual, or maybe a larger number of hard vocabulary questions than usual. Maybe we'll have some hard outlines, right? So we don't know where those hard ones are going to get distributed. So the grammar transitions and outlines might take you longer than usual. if your test happens to have lots of hard questions there. So don't let it panic you too much if that's what happens. But this is a good kind of goal if you're trying to make sure you have enough time for the passages, is just to go at that pace. And if you are aware of all the grammar rules, then you should be answering those fairly quickly. Then we would go back to the beginning of the section. Make sure you don't end it early. You go back to the beginning of the section and you're going to see a vocab question and hopefully all the words. But even if not, try to use the dumb summaries as well. My advice is try to fill in that blank before you look at the choices. That way you have a sense of what you're looking for. And again, you're not getting biased by a word that just looks fun or useful or whatever. And there is one word in here that as soon as I see it, I'm like, ah, this is a gift. They're telling me the answer. And it's not going to be a word most of you would think. It's the word this. Yeah, yep. Anch got it. Very cool. Yes, it is the word this. And why is that such a gift? Because so many of these questions are just repeating things, right? The hardest ones will have all those twists and turns. We talked about that. Those are the twisted relationships ones. If you want to practice those again, exercises, vocab, there. Twisted relationships. These are hard. These are tough. And this really emphasizes that idea that sometimes it's not about the words, it's about the sentence. But this is a case where it's definitely about the words, or even really not even about that. The sentence is just setting me up. They're repeating things. The colon kind of functions the same. It's a way of saying we are about to repeat things. So I'm not thinking what goes in that blank when I read that first sentence. I'm waiting until I've gone through the passage. And then they say this, and that's telling me they're about to repeat what they just said, but the blank, I don't know what they just said, right? So now I got to focus this intentional disruption. So how about our dumb summary is that the blank is filled with something like creating a deliberately disruptive visual experience. I literally do exactly that before I even look at the choices. I have no idea what the choices are at this point, but I know that in the pattern is so clear here. That's what they're going for. So now I'm just asking myself, does cohesive mean disruptive? Maybe I don't know what cohesive means. Maybe I've heard it slightly at some point in the past and I have a sense. I can't define it if you ask me, but I know it doesn't mean disruptive. Harmonious? No, that means harmony. So definitely not. Bewildering? Yeah, maybe. Confusing? Maybe. Innovative means new. So there you go. Done. Now, look, many of you may have gotten that without going through that process, but this is why when we talked about master the middle, I was a nag about making sure you're not just using the strategies and everything on the hard ones, that you're actually thinking it through on the easy and medium ones. Because if you can notice this kind of repetition in the sentence here, and you can fill in that blank by stealing a word in a very lazy word here for that blank. When they do get really hard, you will be able to do that just as smoothly, or at least you'll know that's the goal to do that. And so, yes, you might have to do that untwisting of the hard passages, but that is the goal, is you want to have something in that blank that you feel pretty good about before you look at the choices. So that way, when you do go to the choices, you're not tempted by something that isn't really part of this. I think the fact that this thing starts with highly praised is meant to make us think we need a positive word. Cohesive, harmonious, innovative, they're all positive. But you got to read everything before you start a judge. You can't rule in the case till you have all the evidence. And there's a lot of great evidence in that second sentence. So you got to make sure you hear that first. Cohesive means that kind of things fit together nicely. They cohere. So cohesive kind of fits together nicely. It's basically like the opposite of disruptive, I would say. So that's a good example maybe of a trap in a way. All right, cool. The only other thing I'll say about the vocab is studying vocabulary is a really good thing to do before or in the next couple days because it's very low energy. And a lot of times, what we're trying to do is just see a word. Maybe you can't define it, but maybe you can know that it doesn't mean what you need it to mean when you're doing one of these dumb summaries. So sometimes it's that kind of more process of elimination way of thinking about it. Remember, there is vocab stuff here. There's these flashcards things. Maybe some of you have never even seen these. I don't think these are very good anymore. I've improved. The real vocab happens at this place, the vocabulary page. And hopefully you've been studying. I noticed some of you have. But yeah, go to the new words, shuffle it up, find some words you don't, look at them, and hopefully you can add some words to your repertoire before Saturday. Vocabulary is, to me, the biggest wild card on the test. If we get unlucky and we just get a bunch of words we've never seen before, sucks. I don't know what else to tell you, right? But at least with other aspects of the test, there's a limited menu. There's only like 15 grammar rules. There's only 60 or so transition phrases. So we're limited. Those things are good to memorize. With vocabulary, we don't really know. But the more you see words, the more you learn something about them, the less likely that the randomness of those words is going to impact you. And so hopefully, yeah, you've been studying enough to feel good about that. If you do get to a question where, let's say you're choosing between cohesive and bewildering and you have no clue what either one means, just understand too that when you've reached the limit of your knowledge, right? And pick a choice and move on. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or just whatever feels most right, whatever you have an instinct for, pick it and move on because the magic vocabulary fairy is not going to come down in the middle of the test and whisper the definition in your ear. If you don't know it, it's too late. You got to move on. So don't try to solve a question where you've realized that you don't have the knowledge to solve it. Move on and use the time in the passages. Speaking of knowing when to move on, you've heard me say this. We talked about sacrifices last time. I hate the graphs. I am always going to leave these for last because I know that they take time. I'm personally just not very good at them. So when I am getting to the passages, that last 10 or so questions in the hard module that I'm going to do, I'm looking for the best targets. For me, anything with main ideas, anything with an underline, anything that's those logic questions, even the support and weaken ones, those are my jam. I can do those. I can think through a dumb summary really fast. This stuff slows me down. So I am leaving these for last, knowing that there's a decent chance I won't get to them. You need to have a plan as well for what you're going to sacrifice when that clock is ticking. And it just means I'm randomly guessing. There's no, oh, I rushed through the question. I spent a minute on it and then I guessed something. That's a wasted minute. You're either committing to a question or you're not doing it at all. So think about that. But since we've got the time, give this one a shot. It still uses things like dumb summaries and whatnot. So try to think about that. And then I'll show you how I would deal with something like this. Hmm. And I see some bookmarks already. That's good. I'm going to make a note to talk about that. This is our last reading question. We'll do math next. I'll let you do another 30 seconds or so of thinking. I know this is a toughie, and then I'm going to start showing you my thinking. All right. So there is no set way to do these because the graphs are infinitely varied, the passages are infinitely varied, the time pressure is going to be intense. So don't feel like I'm about to tell you something that you must follow exactly, but this is how I tend to go through these. First of all, I do look at the answer choices because if the choices are long, it just means, I don't know, it's going to be a pain in the neck. So the harder the question usually is, the longer the answer choices. But I'm going to read this and I know I got to pay attention when I get down to here because that's where the blank is, but I still read everything just in case. So consumer psychology research suggests that packaging design can significantly influence perceived product value, particularly when environmental concerns are prominent. Ugh. Theodore Bonono and his research team conducted two separate studies to examine how sustainability-focused packaging affects consumer valuations of household products. I can already see value is on the y-axis. So, okay, there's two studies, right? I'm checking in with the graph just to see. Yeah, okay, I get how that shows up here. In the first study, they recruited 156 young parents under the age of 35, while the second study involved 89 residents of an over 60 retirement community. Now, that's not on the graph, so maybe that matters, but I see study one, study two, but okay. Participants in both studies were asked to estimate the monetary value of identical cleaning products presented in either conventional plastic packaging or eco-friendly biodegradable packaging. Again, okay, that's right here. That's the difference in the bars, so I get how this fits. The findings reveal both the varying degrees to which different demographics respond to environmental messaging and how manufacturers can capitalize on sustainability appeals to enhance perceived product value. Oh my God. Okay. Well, one thing I get is when they say different demographics are going to respond. They're basically saying a demographic is like a kind of like a type of person, basically. So the young parents are a different demographic than the old retirees, right? So that's telling me I've got to compare study one to study two. Like somewhere in this comparison, they want me to compare those two things because they're different demographics, they're different groups of people. Okay. And then the manufacturers can capitalize on sustainability appeals. Well, the sustainability focused packaging is going to be the eco-friendly packaging, and they're enhancing the value. Yeah, okay, it seems like there's a higher value for the eco-friendly packaging. So maybe I need to show like eco is better than conventional, right? So on my dumb summary is relationships, right? I don't care about the information necessarily. And this is true in the regular passages too. I'm always focused on relationships, but especially with graphs where the relationship becomes very visual. So I'm looking for a choice that does that. So now when I go to the choices, that's what I'm focused on first. I do not really want to deal with looking at the numbers. I know some choices might make me do that, but I'm really interested in the relationship. So one versus two, and I can pull that down, and the eco is greater than the con. So both demographic groups assign values above $25 to all products, regardless of packaging type, suggesting that environmental messaging is a consistent baseline effect across different consumer segments. No, if the whole point was I'm supposed to compare them and they're saying they're the same, right? Consistent across the different groups, that's no good. And again, they're saying regardless of packaging type, they're dismissing the fact that one is better. So I don't care if all the values are above $25. I'm not going to check that. I don't care. This fails to capture my dumb summary. This doesn't have the right relationship. Moving on. Residents of the retirement community assigned higher values to products with eco-friendly packaging than did young parents. So there you're comparing the two studies, the two groups. But both groups assigned higher values to products with eco-friendly packaging than to those with conventional packaging. Again, that's also comparing the eco to the conventional and saying the eco is better. So just in terms of dumb summary, seems pretty good. I'd keep it. C, young parents assigned higher values to products with eco-friendly packaging than to those with conventional packaging, demonstrating that environmental messaging resonates with younger consumer demographics. I got lost in that sentence, but one thing I do understand is it's just talking about the young parents. It's not comparing the two groups. So I need to compare the two groups. This is only talking about one. So no. D, Both groups valued eco-friendly packaging more highly. Okay, that matches, right? With residents of the retirement community increasing their valuation by approximately $15 and young parents showing an even greater increase in valuation of approximately 25. So now, okay, they're comparing the two. They're both saying the eco is better. So these two things match my dumb summary. Now I need to think about maybe what's the deal with the data, right? So this one has actual points, right? So the retirement is a difference of 15, right? Now, of course, they didn't put retirement on the thing. So I got to remind myself the second study is the retirees. It's not a difference of 15, right? To go from 25-ish to 55 or something like that. This is 2025, right? So that doesn't seem right. And this one was supposed to be 25, right? That's the young parents. That's study one. This is definitely not that, right? This is an increase of, yeah, maybe a little over 10, right? So these numbers are just wrong. Now, this one also has numbers in a way. Higher values to the products with eco-friendly packaging. Yep, higher values there. And both groups, oh, here, and the retirement community assigned higher values to the eco-friendly than the young parents, right? So yes, this black bar is higher than this black bar. So yeah, there you go. That seems good. And both groups assigned higher values to products with eco-friendly packaging than to those with conventional packaging. Yes, that's obvious. So there you go. It's not easy by any means, but that's how I would go through it. It's mostly that, like, I don't want to do a million things at once. And I think that's what these questions try to get us to do, is to try to think about all this information. But it's just not possible for the human brain to comprehend all this at once. So break it down. Same thing goes with the non-graph passages, is break it down if the choices are long into smaller pieces, look at the individual pieces and test those out. And especially if we don't understand the passage, the choices are usually easier to understand anyway. So breaking them into little pieces gives you stuff to go hunt for in the passage. So that's basically what I'm doing. The only other thing I'll say about the passages is, again, plan to run out of time and get comfortable with picking an answer, bookmarking something, and moving on before you are 100% sure. You are placing a bet. And so on the entire test, reading and math, you want to use the bookmarks a similar way you do during the practice test, during the exercises. You should be bookmarking things where you have not proven your answer quickly and confidently. And like I said, with proven. Those are the three things that you're really thinking about. And if you're doing that, then you're doing well on the test. There will be things that will be hard to prove. It'll be things where it's hard to be quick. And there'll be things where maybe you're not that confident, but that's the goal. And so you only want to bookmark things where you fail to do one of these three, because you don't want to go back to a question just because it's hard, right? There are going to be those vocab questions, like I said, where you don't know the words and you have to guess. Don't bookmark that. Don't go back to that with extra time. If you don't know the words, there's nothing you can do. You're done. So move on. Don't bookmark that. You should only be bookmarking things where you're like, if I saw this again, if I had time to go back to this, could I do more work? Could I do something more to prove my answer? If the answer is no, then you're done with it. Move on. And so I think in math, I end up bookmarking maybe more than usual in the first module, because I know that I could do more to prove the answers if I got lots of time, because I could just throw in Desmos or do some other strategy, do algebra, something like that. So just a good thing to think about with the bookmarks is, just because something's hard doesn't mean it's worthy of your time again. You got to sometimes just move on, or also just trust that the strategy worked and hard stuff can be solved with strategies. Cool. All right, so you're taking the tests, you've just finished the hard reading module, your brain is mush. What do? They're going to give you a 10-minute break. So take the break, get up, go somewhere, and be aware that because the test is digital and everyone's testing in different times, sometimes that happens where someone has a problem with their computer or something and doesn't start on time with everyone else. If that happens to you, that's okay. You got to stay focused, but there will maybe be people moving around while you're still testing or not. So just keep that in mind. And if you are moving around while other people are testing, just be polite and whatever. But yeah, take the 10-minute break. And when you do that, take your photo ID with you, take your admission ticket with you, and that way you can get back in, because they're supposed to check that stuff again. They don't usually, but you should. And make sure if you're wearing a watch or something that you're keeping track of the time, because it'll just start without you. So if you take longer than 10 minutes, they'll just start. So you got to make sure you're back quick. So scout out the bathroom and get there before everyone else, so you're not running out of time. But definitely get up, have a snack, use the break to refresh your mind, and that way you can get the blood flowing and get back into it for the math. All right. Here's a great example of one of those master the middle type math questions. You would not want to be stalling, staring, unsure about something like this. Every aspect of this is something strategic or memorization based. Sensing some sluggishness maybe on this one. Follow instructions. Linear function f is graph in xy plane. The slope of the graph of the linear function g, different function, is 3 times the slope of f. So let's find the slope of f. So the slope of f, I don't know if I'm allowed to write that, but there you go. Up 2 over 3, right? Find some points that kind of look good. Up 2 over 3. Now, as I do any math question, I'm thinking not only about what I'm doing, but also what they might be doing to trick me. So what they might be doing here is they might be making the scale different from what I expect. But I do check that. This is 1 box, 2 boxes. That looks good. 1 box, 2 box looks good. So 2 over 3. Sometimes they'll mess with the scale and make one of the axes a different unit than the other. So be careful of that. So the slope of g is going to be 3 times that. So 2/3 times 3, no need for a calculator, the 3's cancel, is 2. All right, if the graph of g is an x-intercept -1, 0, what is the value of g of 6? No Desmos necessary here. Plug points into equations. We provide the equation. It's y equals mx plus b. We have an m. We have a point, right? And as I'm plugging it in, again, I'm thinking of traps. Make sure your x goes in your x and your y goes in your y, right? Because y comes first, so you're going to want to put that -1 in there, but no. 2 times -1 is -2. So let's add the 2. I should have done it that way. So I get 2 is b, right? Now, why am I solving for b? I don't know. Just plug points in equations tells me to do it, right? So I'm going to do that. And then now I have my full equation, which is g of x is equal to 2 times x plus 2. Plug points into equations again, because g of 6 just means put that in for x. So 2 times 6 plus 2, 12 plus 2 is 14. Done. At no point in this process am I really thinking hard. And that's not to say that it's an easy question. It's mostly just that this is very robotic. And I wrote XY plane at the top here because that's my categorization for this. I think the college boards, the question banks, categorizations for math are just like all over the place and basically unintelligible to anybody who doesn't study the SAT as their job like I do. So XY plane is out of my way of saying anything that involves graphs is a plug points into equations question. It doesn't matter whether they give us a graph like they do here or with the G where there is no graph of it. We should be thinking of it the same way. We want equations and points, right? Because that's what the XY plane is all about. It's a place where you graph things and there's points on the graphs. That's it. So that reminds me of a lot of my strategies is recognizing that whether it's lines or quadratics or something else, plug points and equations is my favorite place to go. And if any of that stuff is iffy for you, that is a good example of stuff that you want to review. XY plane videos. I've got things on the circle equation, which is obscure. There's quadratics landmarks, anything about y-intercepts, y equals mx plus b. You can maybe do some of these lessons from the strategy series again, plug points into equations. All this stuff is gold if you're struggling with math. This XY plane thing is the biggest topic by far. And plenty of exercises here as well to try different aspects of it or the more strategic stuff. Really good stuff to practice tomorrow. But I'm not really thinking hard. Plug points and equations keeps me pretty much on point. So you would like to be in that place too. Let me give you another example. There's another XY plane question. I can tell because, well, it's a graph. It's an equation. And you can totally go to Desmos, but you really don't need to. So if you're taking the test and you hit that button to go to the next question, and this is the next question, as soon as you see it, you should be like, oh, I'm plugging something into that, right? Maybe you won't end up doing it, but that's the first thought you've got to have. As soon as you see that f of x equation at the top, you're going to be like, all right, something's going in there, right? Now, when they say which of the following represents the y-intercept, and then they give me 4 y-intercepts, I could start plugging in those y-intercepts and seeing if they work. But when I have an equation in function form where the y is off on its own, I generally think of it as I'm plugging in x value and getting a y value out. So even if they did not give me any answer choices here, I'm plugging in a point because they're talking about the point, a y-intercept. Every y-intercept is another one of those things where you have to translate it. If they talk about y-intercepts, that's code for x equals 0. So I can plug a point in even if I've only got half the point, because then I'll get the other half. So 0 plus 2, I would not do this on my scratch paper. I'm only doing this for your benefit. So 2 times -1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. So there you go. That's it. This is a 20-second question. 20 seconds. Now, I would rather you take a little bit more than 20 seconds and make sure that you are getting it right. So if this was in any way iffy for you, talking about making sacrifices and pacing things out on the math section, I would much rather you get every single question right from numbers 1 to 14 than worry about rushing through this stuff to get to the hard ones. Because if this is not a 20-second question for you, then the hard ones are going to be a giant mess. So you're better off getting the points where you know you can get them. Take the time and throw this in Desmos and be absolutely sure that your reasoning is right if you want. I would rather you get those points. Maximize correct answers is always the name of the game, and you don't want to be getting stuff wrong in those easier questions. But I think if you're thinking strategically on your test, you will see that many times you're going to have points and equations, and you're going to need to plug them in. And remember, if you don't have points or equations, we supply them ourselves. So this is another thing you could do in the next day or so. If you go to the More button in the homework portal, this training mode thing, many of you still have this on, which is great. So if it's off, if you turn it off, maybe turn it back on in the Satellovision or any of the exercises. And for math questions, you'll see this, right? This little kind of reminder to plug points into equations. So if you feel like in a question you only have an equation, this is advice of, okay, maybe there are points that you're not seeing, right? If they talk about intercepts at all, those are points. We have a 0 that we can plug in. If they give us a graph, those are points. Pick a point off the graph, right? Function notation, they might write a point in a different way. A story often will talk about a point without X's and Y's, but it's still functioning that same way. If they ask you to solve for X, you might not have a point yet to plug in, but if you have answer choices, maybe you can guess and check those answer choices. And I don't think it's a last resort, but it's last on the list, is arithmetize. If they don't give you numbers, make some up, right? See what happens. So the same thing goes with the thing if we only have points, right? Like we did in the last one. Make an equation, use your memory. Y equals mx plus b is the most important formula on the SAT. So you've got to provide that when the question calls for it. They talk about lines, write y equals mx plus b on your page. So maybe turn that trainer on and think about it that way. It's a good thing to think about for every math question. It's like a little mantra, plug points in equations. Do I have points? Do I have equations? Do I have points? Do I have equations? I'm literally saying that in my head constantly as I take an SAT. So again, this is one that you want to get in less than 30 seconds. Plug a point in. And then speaking about sacrifices, we get to stuff where we look at it and we know we're in a little bit of trouble, right? Look at this question, look at these answer choices. I know this is maybe going to suck. However, I also know these kind of look like equations and they don't seem to have any points. So if I have equations, but no points, where do I find the points? Make them up. This to me would definitely be in that last third of the hard math module, but it would be one I would target. And I'll show you, but I think Desmos really does make this arithmetize even easier to keep track of. So feel free to do what you need to do it, but I will throw Desmos up in a second. I think you should try this on your own. It's a great question. And this would be hard, so it could be a sacrifice. All right, keep working. I'm going to start throwing some things in Desmos. That's good. This would be enough to give me the answer. And I'll explain it, but I do want to keep moving because I want to get to a couple more things. And yeah, there's no chance of doing algebra here. The reason we arithmetize, the reason I even called the strategy arithmetize is it's like a bad, lame Harry Potter spell, right? You'd have algebra, you wave your magic wand, and boom, you turn it into arithmetic. It arithmetizes, right? Because, and this is the whole point of plug points and equations in the first place, is when we have letters, math gets harder. There's a reason you learned how to do arithmetic and things like guess and check when you were like 8 years old. And then you didn't learn algebra till you're like 13 or 14, right? There's a gap there because it's harder to do algebra. So you wait longer until your brain is developed for it. But that just goes to show that our brains strongly prefer to have numbers. And so what arithmetizing does is it turns this algebra back into arithmetic. And so we can think about it in numbers. And I could do this manually. I could pick numbers for B and C and D and F, and then I could solve the equation that they gave me to get a value of A. And then they're looking for the value of C. So then I have to just go through all the answer choices. And I could, as long as I'm organized, I could take all the values of A, B, D, and F and put them in and get a value out. And hopefully the value that comes out of the answer choice is the same value of C that I made up in the first place. If that's confusing, then let me just show you that's exactly what I did here. I typed the original equation. You might have seen that it prompted me to add sliders for B, C, D, and F. If it doesn't prompt you to do that at any point in Desmos, you can just type B equals 1 and it will automatically make a slider for that. For just, I don't know, variety is the spice of life reasons, I made B1, C2, D3, and F4. I did not think about it at all. I just made them different just because once I go to the calculator, I don't really care what they are. And then what happens is once it has B, C, D, and F, it's going to calculate for me what the value of A is. So it happens to be a relatively easy kind of number, 1.25. Now everything is accounted for. A has a value, B has a value, C, D, F, all have values. The answer choices are supposed to be the value of C. So I moved the C down so I could see it better and recognize I'm looking for a value of 2, right? Then I just typed all the answer choices. And some of them gave me messy numbers. But one of them, choice C, gave me the thing I wanted. So that's it. I'm done. That's the only one that worked. If there are multiple answers that work, that's the whole benefit of having the slider. If I had to do this manually, I'd need to change the numbers and redo the whole problem with whatever answers are left over. But if I had a problem here where multiple answers worked, I could just kind of start sliding things around and see. And so look, if I change the values, everything kind of changes. A changes, the other things change, but I'm still getting the same answer. That's why arithmetize works, is it doesn't matter what these are. For all values of A, B, C, D, and F, this is going to be true. And we could show that with algebra, but I don't care about the actual algebraic proof. I just care about getting the answer. So Desmos is really cool because it keeps you very organized when things get complicated. But there is no part of me that would do algebra here. And another big piece of advice for the math section is listen to your feelings. When you look at a math question and your brain goes, oh no, I'm not touching this. This is hard. This is crazy. Oh my God, I don't even want to do this. Any of those feelings are good feelings. When I look at this, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this algebra. But I channel that feeling to be like, okay, then let's not do algebra, right? Let's do a strategy. Let's see if we can plug points in. Let's see if we can arithmetize, right? When you feel like there's a problem with a question or something you don't like about it or something that you think is going to make it annoying, follow that feeling. Ask, what is the specific thing that I don't like? Because if you can answer that question, odds are good you've actually answered the question of what to do about it, right? So if you have a particular thing that's bothering you or a particular thing you're stuck on in a math question, try to voice that in your head. And if you can, that's usually the thing to focus on first. You can usually fix it. So here, I don't like that I don't have any numbers. So what do? I made up numbers. This is gettable. This is definitely hard, but it's gettable. Let's contrast that a little bit with something like this, which might be hard, but mostly because we might not remember a simple definition, right? This is the equivalent in the reading section of not knowing a word and not being able to answer a question. If you don't know what standard deviation is, you can't answer this. It's basically a guess. And that would suck because that's something that's very controllable. You can study standard deviation before the test. So hopefully this is something that you guys can get in a couple seconds. If not, you probably want to review standard deviation. It's not good. Let's do that again. Okay. So I drew these little things because in my brain, I see these as like frequency kind of curves, right? So when we look at East Springfield, what's happening is there's 5 hours of sleep is down here, 9 is up here, same thing here. This one kind of has a little bump here. This one is much lower to start and it has like a spike and then it comes back down, right? So these look different, right? This way is the frequency, right? Normally we see the frequency as an up and down thing, but just the way this is drawn in a chart, I'm thinking of it more left and right, but it's the same idea, right? Tilt your head if you need to. But this is simple. If we know that we have this kind of bunching, right? All the points seem to be around this. This is low deviation. This is high deviation. The answer is A. That's it. If you know this and have it memorized, it takes just as long as it does to read. But I get that this is also something that's easy to confuse because our brain sees that spike as a high point, right? But it's low deviation because what is standard deviation? It is a measurement of the spread of the data. The data or the hours of sleep in East Springfield is more spread out, right? There's a middle, there's a high point, but the high point is relatively low and the low points are relatively high, right? It's even, it's flat. So the points, the data points are much more spread out. The middle is harder to notice. The things that aren't in the middle are close to the middle, right? They're or at least in terms of the frequency. Whereas in West Springfield, there almost everyone is getting 8 hours of sleep. And the people who aren't are getting close to 8 hours of sleep. There's some outliers, but for the most part, everyone's all bunched together around 8 hours of sleep. And so that has low deviation. Those points are not deviating from that middle very much. This is a very routine concept. There's a good chance you will never see a standard deviation question on your test. It's very possible it won't come up. But if it does come up, this is the kind of thing that's not really gettable with any sort of strategy. There's nothing you can do in the moment except just try to go with your memory. This is the kind of stuff that's also very controllable between now and Saturday. It's just, it's there, right? Go to, where is it? Go to the practice tab, go to statistics, do some exercises, do some videos, standard deviation right there. Look at that. Very similar kind of pictures. So that's the kind of thing that is very good for a Friday prep. If you don't really want to study on Friday, that's okay. We'll talk more about that in a sec. But if you are going to study, then very low maintenance, low brain energy kind of stuff is good. Watching me talk about something might be all it takes to get it right. So this would be the kind of thing that would be a real shame to lose points on the test. This is fully within your control. It is just a memorization thing. There's not really much of a twist here. So I look at this and I don't really panic. Whereas that algebra question, I'm like, oh, this is annoying because I have to do some work and I'm going to solve that problem. Here, I'm just like, oh, okay. It's just a matter of defining the terms. I want to talk about one more thing before we start wrapping up here. Because when people do worse on their real test compared to the practice test in math, the number one reason is percentages. Number one reason, percentages. So that is a place where there's lots of traps, but there's also ways to avoid the traps. This is a hard question, but I think it's gettable. Give it a shot. Try to think. If something is bothering you about it, what's bothering you? What can you do to fix that particular problem? The thing that bothers me is I don't know how many rabbits there are. Hares. right? Gosh, this would be so much easier if I knew how many rabbits there were. So why don't I just make it up? And when you're dealing with percents, start with 100. January 2010, 100 hares increased by 10% over the course of that year. So 10% of 100, well, I don't even need a calculator for that. That leaves us with 110 hares. That's good. And then decreased by 6%. That one I'm going to need a calculator for, or at least the open formula, right? So open formula, we've got the plus or minus one because it's a decrease. So 1 is a P, not an F. 1 minus 0.06, that's my decrease in percent. And I'm looking for the new value because it's decreasing from the 110. So 110 times 0.94, basically, is going to give me my new value. I forgot what that is, so we're going to type it in. 0.94. 103.4. And yes, there's a half of a hair, but that doesn't bother me. I just care about the numbers. So that, and this is weird, but that is actually the value of h. Normally when we arithmetize, right, we make up a value for the variable, but the way this question was constructed, it's backwards. That doesn't really bother me because I'm just going to work through the story the way that common sense tells me. I'm not going to go back in time. I'm going to go forward in time the way the story is telling me. I'm literally just following instructions here. So now I have a value of h, and they want to know which of the following represents the number of Arctic hares at the beginning of 2010. So that's the 100 that I made up. So I'm plugging in 103.4 for h, and I'm hoping to get 100. And I would go through the process and put it in, but for the sake of time, I will just tell you that the answer is A here. It's going to work out that if you do 103.4 divided by 1.1 times 0.94, you will get 100. So you can verify that if you would like, but I promise that is what happens. And that's very counterintuitive, right? Because we associate percentages with multiplication. So a lot of you put C here, and I don't blame you. That feels like the right answer. But that's what's difficult about percentages is that our brain is not good at thinking the logic through in a lot of ways. We're just bad at it. And so you have to admit defeat. And that's why we arithmetize. That's why we stick to the formulas, the open formulas, because those are things that kind of are designed to force us to do it the right way, is really what it comes down to. And so much of the math is really about knowing where you can trust your instincts, or so much of the reading, too, is about knowing where you can trust your instincts and where you can't. And at least in math, we have the knowledge that the test is organized by difficulty. So 1 to 22 is going to be basically going from easy to hard. And around number 15 is where you really got to watch out in both the first module and the hard module, where, why are you getting an easy answer to a hard question? That's scary. And so maybe you're right. Maybe your logic is flawless, but it's hard to know. The good logic and bad logic feel the same in your brain. So you got to be able to prove it. That's why we're thinking about bookmarks even when we're taking the real test. Have I proven my answer, or am I just thinking about the answer? Am I just feeling my way to the answer? It's always worse. Now, if you're running out of time, you got to do something and get some answers. But I think a mistake people make on the real test, and again, this gets back to why I brought up the percentage thing in the first place, is when the time pressure is there, or even just the pressure of the test. A big thing that people do wrong is they start to abandon all the stuff that has worked for them throughout their prep. People who do worse on the real test usually start second guessing themselves, and they start second guessing the strategy. And they're like, oh, I thought I might be able to arithmetize on the Arctic hares question, but I didn't do it because I didn't think it would work. Why? Why? If these strategies have been working for you all along, why are you second guessing them on the real test? You can't do that. You got to stick to the plan. You'll be nervous. That's okay. You'll be flustered because of the time, but My advice is stick to the plan. When you see an opportunity to arithmetize or plug points into equations, do it. When the time is ticking down and you've got to do those passages as fast as you can, don't skip the dumb summary step. Do it. Don't do this. Don't skip the step where you look for trap answers and look for strong words in the choices. Do that step. It is better to commit to the strategy and make sure that you are actually following through and following the right steps on the questions that you do get to, rather than rushing through everything, skipping steps, skipping strategies, and just for the sake of completion. It is better to guess randomly on a handful of hard questions and have a 25% chance of being right than it is to rush and do a half-ass job on everything. You have to, if you're going to do a question, commit to doing it well, commit to doing it right, stick to the plan that's gotten you this far. The strategies work. I'm not taking the August SAT, but I've taken many of them, and I took the June SAT, and trust me, the strategies work. If the real test feels harder, it's mostly a perception thing. It's harder because it counts. If it feels hard in the practice test, it's because you're nervous. And so that's okay. It's okay to be nervous. That's your fight or flight response. And you have more control over how that impacts you than you think, right? Don't run away from the strategies. Don't run away from hard questions, right? Fight for those points. And when you are in that fight or flight response, just like when a caveman was being chased by a lion, it hones your skills. It hones your ability to focus and your ability to notice things. And so those strong words that maybe you were missing on the practice test, they might stand out really obviously on the real test. All the more reason to stick to the strategies. Those times where you were unsure about arithmetic or couldn't do the mental math on the practice test, when you're in that adrenaline is going, you are a superhuman, right? So some of you, when you get nervous, you move more into the escape mode. You run away from things, you quit. Try not to do that. You have control over that. Try to fight for those points. Try to trust the strategies and trust yourself. And I think it will go pretty well. So it might not feel that way, right? The real test always feels rough because you're going to focus on the questions that you almost got right and didn't have time for and were struggling with. But there's so much that you're going to do that's very routine that you won't even really realize how well you're doing. And also just remember too, the SAT is not a test that's scored on the same scale as your normal test in school. If you get 2/3 of the questions right on a test in school, you barely pass with a 66%. If you get 2/3 of the questions right on an SAT, you have an above average score. That's like a 1250. So I'd love you to do better than that, but even still, it just goes to show you can think you're getting a lot wrong, but the scaling of the SAT is different. So roughly 10 points a question. So you can afford 5 errors, no problem, and still have a 750, which is a 99 percentile score. So it's not going to feel the same way a test in school feels when you're doing well or poorly. But that's kind of my parting wisdom here. I think, yeah, like I said, the main mistake people make is that stop doing what they've been doing and they treat the real test different from the practice tests. The only real thing you got to make sure you're doing differently on the real test is that you are well rested. So tonight, if you've got more time and you want to deal with more SAT besides this, feel free to start diving into those videos, maybe go back to some old practice tests. Do not take a new practice test. At this point, even if you've never taken one, that ship has sailed. You're done. Unless you've got all of tomorrow off and you want to take one first thing in the morning, that time is past. It is better to rest your brain. So tomorrow night, Thursday night, totally fine to be studying a little bit. If it starts to stress you out, though, turn it off. You have my permission. Turn it off. And this is really important. If you remember, this will be recorded, and you can show this recording to your parents. You do not need to study on Friday at all. If you want to hang out with your friends, hang out with your friends. If you want to watch TV, play video games, do it. I don't care. You do not need to study on Friday. Rest your brain, lower the stress. At that point, if there's something you don't know, so it goes. You're better off being in the right mental state of mind than cramming for the SAT. You cannot cram for this test, so don't try. We've already done so much great work over 8 weeks, so you are ready. Trust the process, trust yourself, and take it easy. And go to bed relatively early Friday night for sure. I recommend going to bed a little early on Thursday as well to get in that sleep cycle. And then on Saturday, eat breakfast in the morning. Make sure Friday night you've got all your stuff packed for Saturday, but make sure you've got plenty of time on Saturday to do whatever your morning routine is. Eat some breakfast, pack, get your stuff in the car or whatever, and get to the site. The admission ticket should say that you got to be there at, I believe, 7:45 a.m. It's early. And when you get there, they're going to do a whole lot of instructions and signing in. It's going to be a while before you test. So if you are nervous, like, you've got time to calm down. But if you have any questions, let me know. Definitely let me know if you have any thoughts after the test is over. Let me know how the scores are when you're done. You can chat them to me or any of us at Test Score Prep and let us know. We definitely are curious. But at that, I'll kind of leave it open. If you guys have other questions in this next few minutes, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, good luck and just give it your best. Fight for every point. That's all. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys. I think I got all my points across. I'll make sure. But yeah, if you're ready to go, you can go.
Thank you.
Yep, you're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Scores come back on September 5th. September 5th. And remember to check this thing I'll try to post some stuff if I've got some extra stuff. But yep, any last minute questions, worries, concerns? Fire away. I've got a couple minutes for the next thing.
A couple questions.
Go
They're
for it.
Small, but okay. First, my one question is, I know you said it again and again, but like running out of time on the modules, like especially the English one and the math one, the hard ones, if you're running out of time on those, but you're pushing those questions to the end, but you're still not having time to do those questions. On the real thing, are you aiming to run out of time, or I don't know, like
I am. This is my job. All I do is take SATs, and when I take an SAT, I know that it is very likely that I will run out of time. 50, right? And this is my job. So if I'm in reading, at least, like understanding that there's only so much time, I think it's very important that you just accept that could happen. If it doesn't, awesome. But also the sacrifice plan is, okay, when I get to those passages, what am I gonna work on? So for me, again, it's not the graphs. I don't like those. So those always get thrown to the last. When I get to the passages, I am not going in order. I am picking things that I like. So I tend to do the first few because those main idea ones I like. I think those are usually on the easier side overall. Dumb summaries work really well there. So those ones I may be doing in order. But then I'm glancing at it. If it looks like a pain, I'm not doing it. I'll leave it. And just save yourself 30 seconds at the end to go back to anything that you left blank and just pick a random letter. Just pick B for everything. In math, it's the same thing. When I get to question 15, I'm not like stuck in the order of things. I'm looking at something. If it looks within 5 seconds like it's going to be a nightmare, I'm skipping it and moving on. And with math, I usually have time to go back to everything, but I'm planning in case I don't. You never know what's going to happen. You never know if you're just going to get sucked into a question. But I went to this page to show you there are these pacing strategy videos that you have easy access to. This might be good to watch. I don't think I'll say anything different in these videos, but maybe I'll say it longer and maybe that's good. So yeah, I think just try to look for opportunities to use the main strategy. So if you see a math question with points and equations, that's a good target. Trust it. Yeah.
I guess my last question is, especially on the math, because I've been doing much better than I was like doing obviously a couple months ago.
That's great.
I don't know how to say this. For that, even though my last score was in like the 650, for that 690 to 750 range, which questions are you really aiming to hit and really get to minimize? I know you've probably talked about this a lot.
No, it's fine. There's so much variety, right? So for the How to Score X playlist, which is also in this kind of strategies videos part of the portal here, there is a video for like how to score 700, how to score 750. And I basically talk about individual things. So you could skip around through that and just be like, have I done this step of the process? That might give you might discover that there's something like, oh my God, I completely missed this topic. Or, oh my God, I haven't even thought about this thing yet. So there might be something in there that's just like a kind of obvious answer. The more complicated answer to get 700, you basically, and I think I do say this in the video, you basically need to be perfect on the predictable stuff. So this kind of moves into your running out of time worry, right? Is basically if you have the limited amount of time, you want numbers 1 through 14 to be perfect. Now, are you making careless mistakes? Are you getting something wrong in that 1 to 14 zone?
I was, but now I think I've improved on that. So I have maybe one mistake in my last like 2 practice tests. So
that's awesome. That's good. That's really good because it's very hard to get 700 if you are losing points there. So that's awesome. So maybe try to see if there's something you can do to clean up those. Beyond that, then I would say what my guess is that you're so intent on getting to all of those hard questions that it's making it harder for you to do well on any of them. Because you're probably starting them, doing like a minute and a half of work, and then realizing you're not getting anywhere, and then you move on to the next one, and then another minute goes by, and this one I'm stuck on too. So my advice is just take all those spare minutes in all those places, find the easiest target in 15 to 22 and commit to it. And usually it's going to be those XY plane questions because those are ones where you can maybe throw in Desmos, maybe arithmetize, plug points into equations, that kind of stuff. And they're more predictable. So that's where the quadratics come in. Quadratic basics for sure, but the twists are going to be really hard. And those are good ones to practice again, maybe because you'll at least see how like I translate. They're giving me information, but it's not like in the best format, right? They're talking about a vertex, but they're not using the word vertex. They're talking about a y-intercept, but they're avoiding using that word. And our job is to be like, oh, this is what they're really saying. This is the information they're giving me. That kind of thing. I don't. Ugh. Oh, and here, these are good too. If you've done the practice test and you've reviewed it, one thing you can always do is some of them have this video of me taking it for the first time. So if your worry is like that hard module, how do I decide which questions to do? How do I figure out what to do very quickly? You could literally watch me do those for the first time and you'll see that I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm committed to those strategies and I'm like, okay, let's plug points in, let's do this. And I pick the ones that are good targets and it usually works out. Yeah. Did I say anything in there that kind of resonated?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And then my last little question was, I know last week I talked with you and you said to do those geometry like twist questions and the other twists. I did some of them and a lot of more like the geometry basics and the other ones. But do you think now with 2 days left, is it really high priority to do those kind of twist questions now, or not really to watch those videos that you said is probably better and to do vocab?
Yeah, I mean, gauge your own stress. If you're doing those and you're like, this is making me miserable, I'm getting a lot wrong because you will get a lot wrong. They're really hard. Like
Yeah.
no knock on you, but like I made those twist sets very hard. So if you get 30% of them right, that's actually pretty good. Because if you get 30% of those hard questions right on the test, numbers 15 to 22, then you're gonna get a 700. You don't need to get all those
Yeah.
right to get that 700. And I think that's also part of it too, is once you kind of realize that, you can get like 7 questions wrong on the math section and still be pretty solidly in the 700s, I would think. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
yeah, like that's nice. It's very freeing. So I would say the easiest things to do in the next day are make sure you're as close to perfect as possible in the first module, so you're not losing points unnecessarily there, where the time pressure won't be as great, and really try to be quick, efficient, clean on the first 14 or so of the set of the hard module. And then just yeah, if you want to do those quadratic twists, geometry twists, whatever, go for it. But again, if you start stressing yourself out, quit. It's fine. Go to the easy stuff. In fact, for a lot of these, what you can do is when you took a practice test, you got placed in the hard module. There's an easy module that exists that you've never seen. So you could also just go back into Blue Book, start test 8, get every single reading question wrong, just leave them all blank, and then it'll put you in the easy module where you'll have really easy questions. But you
Uh,
could just like speed through them and be like, okay, how fast can I go here without losing accuracy? Same thing with
right.
math, right? Just do the easy module. It will be, but you can also find maybe some places where you're like, huh, maybe I could have done that a little bit better. Maybe I could have been a little faster. That kind of thing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much again.
Yeah,
Thank you
no
for all your,
problem.
yeah.
Definitely let me know if you have any questions in the next day or two. And then, yeah, if you have any thoughts on how the test went, scores when they come back, share them. I'd love to know.
For
Yeah,
sure. Thank you so much.
no problem. No problem. Ansh, I think I answered your question. I hope is they'll be here, is where the recordings will be. Does anyone else have questions?
I have one question.
Go for it.
So I'm trying to master like the Desmos section, but I keep running into like roadblocks with functions and sometimes like geometry twists and stuff like that. I know you just went over that with Amin, but is there any like tips or anything that you have to be able to consistently put these functions into Desmos or just faster ways to get them done?
It's highly dependent on the question, right? So I wish there was an easy answer, but sometimes I think we get so addicted to Desmos that we end up doing things in Desmos that are not good Desmos questions. For example, where was it? Like, yeah, this is maybe the trivial example. Oh gosh, it's not going to work, is it? Ugh. Oh, here it is. It was that one with the y-intercept. Is it this one? Is it going to go?
Well,
Never mind.
I did that y-intercept one in Desmos, and I got it done in about 10 to 15 seconds.
Right, but I worry that is that a case where you're hesitant to plug things in, right? Because plugging in zero, right? Two
Yeah.
times negative one squared. Negative one squared is one. One times two, two. Remember too, Desmos isn't always more efficient if it increases the chance of you making a mistake. To me, multiplying 2 and negative 1 squared, I could do that in my head without really any chance of error. But I genuinely, when I take the test, I catch myself all the time typing something in Desmos wrong. I don't know if you've had that problem, but I type in Desmos just the wrong thing all the time. And so if you're plugging garbage equations in, you're going to get garbage equations out. So I would say this is a case where Desmos is maybe slightly longer even with it, but I would say that kind of maybe reflects why Desmos is maybe causing problems, is it might be that you're over reliant on it. One thing I try to notice is if I'm opening Desmos, am I doing it with a reason? Am I opening Desmos to do something in particular, or am I opening Desmos because I have nothing better to do? If it's the latter, that's not a great sign. So maybe some of the advice that I gave to Amin would be good for you too, is go into those easy modules and seeing, can I do these without Desmos? Or where does Desmos make sense? And trying to be fast and seeing if you've got good instincts for that on the easy ones. I think those same instincts should be what you follow on the hard ones. I know I'm like dancing around your question.
No, it's okay. But on that note, when you get to the hard one, say I feel confident about all 14 of the easier questions on the hard module, do you have
Yeah.
any tips for regressions with the hard ones?
Yeah, if you see a good moment, if you got like a points and they feel like they're going to be like a regression that they give you, so a y equals mx plus b or a standard quadratic, those are good candidates. If you're looking for the other ones, I know they're in here somewhere. Is it here? There's a Desmos regressions one. Have you done that one? I forget where it is in all this.
I don't know if I've done that one.
Oh, here it is. It's under step 4.
Okay.
So step 4 exercises, Desmos regressions. It's 5 questions. It's not much. And there is a video of how to do the regression. The video is actually outdated because they added the button to auto regression. But when the regressions don't fit the normal molds, you need to know how to do it the old-fashioned way. So that's actually pretty good for giving you that sense of it. And I think that will also help you with the function stuff because a lot of them are functions where we got to convert back to just y as the notation because then the regression won't work with f of x. So that might solve some of those problems too. Yeah. But there's definitely like TikToks and stuff of people doing like crazy regressions. I am not doing anything like that. I just use what I've got in that lesson, the basic table, button, anything else I'm skeptical of, and I don't find it efficient.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I've only got about 7 minutes. I do have something at 7, guys, so I'll try my best to work till then, but I do have another tutoring session 2 days, 3 days before the test. So if you have another question to ask, I'm reading yours right now. Page number 6, question 17, hard on the Couldn't understand how to use the 3060. Let's see. I don't know what that question is, but let's see if I can find it. 617, hard module, 6. Math, hard. 7. Oh, well, one thing about this is it doesn't even count towards that score. It's a pretest question, so it actually doesn't count to the score, but doesn't mean it's an invalid thing to ask.
Grammarly doesn't just.
Ugh, I hate these commercials. Come on. Okay, let's see. Oh, I know how I knew it was 3690. Check those numbers, right? 30, 60, 45. Those are clues that we're going to use the reference chart. But so are radical 3 and radical 2, right? Because those show up. Oh gosh, why can't I find anything? There it is, right? So radical 3 is part of the special right triangle. This is a good example of them telling you information in code when they're not actually coming out and saying, hey, there's a 3690 triangle here. But as soon as I saw that radical 3 in this thing, I'm like, that's a mighty coincidence if that's there just randomly and not part of a 306090. And sure enough, 2x is the diagonal, x is the side. Wait a minute, I've seen that before. 2x is the hypotenuse, x is this side. Suddenly, I've got a whole plan. We actually don't even need the 30, 60, 90 triangle. We could do Pythagorean theorem for that, but obviously it's much faster to just know the other side is the x squared 3. But look for little clues. Yeah, that's huge. It's like grammar. Geometry is a limited menu. There's only so many things they ask about. That's why that unit circle thing, that TikTok we talked about at the beginning, just made me so mad. Is it's not really on the menu. It just feels new when it's not really part of how you're going to solve anything. 30, 60, 90s are they love that flavor, so to speak. It's just they know most people forget it exists. But if you know that like radical threes, radical twos, the 30, 60, 90s themselves, those numbers show up, you should be thinking, maybe I can fit this in. So that's how I knew is limited menu. What other option did I have? Good question though. If there's anyone more last
Wait,
minute one.
I have one question. Okay.
Sure, go.
This
Go
one,
ahead, Noah.
it might be dumb, but I took practice tests. Okay, so I took 9, 8, I'm pretty sure. But then when I took practice test 7, I felt like the reading part of that one was really different. It was like harder, but maybe that just might have been me. But then like also the math, I thought it'd be easier, but then I somehow did like worse like on that because there was so many trap answers and I fell into like, all of them. I don't know why, but I think like on that one it was just like so weird because like I like scored like 200 points below like what I usually do. So it was like really weird, but do you know like why or something?
So this is an age-old question, is right? Oh, are certain tests easier or harder than the others? And the standard answer to everyone with that is no, not really. There are slight variabilities, but the SAT, the whole reason it exists is that it's a standardized test. It is standardized to a score curve. They are making it as close to the same as possible. But obviously that's over large populations. You individually have certain strengths and weaknesses that might line up with a particular test. And so if you get vocab words on your vocab questions that you happen to know, that's great. You're going to do really well and it's going to be easy for you. But the converse is that if you get a bunch of vocab words you've never seen before, well, then now you're guessing randomly on some questions. And that vocab is the easiest place to explain that, but it's all over the test. But most of it is in your head. And that's why I said to make sure you stick to the strategies. Excuse me, because we see things that we're like, oh, I've never seen this before. I don't know this, but I've got points, I've got equations. It doesn't matter what the equations look like. I am plugging them in. And so I bet some of those traps that you fell into in math were cases where you thought about how an equation would work without actually taking the time to plug them in. And that's again why our perception is tough. You may feel like I'm getting these without even having to do any work. The answers are obvious and you're falling into trap after trap. So my advice is just for all of that, right? Your perception of easy and hard is purely a perception thing. When you're taking the test, let's say it is a little bit harder. That gets evened out in the curve. The curve is going to basically, and it's not based on like how people do on that day. What I mean is like the SAT is pre-planned how that particular test is going to be scored. So if it is a slightly harder test, it actually means it's probably better for you because then you can get more questions wrong and still do well. And so it's constantly like moving a little bit. But when a test is hard, it means it's going to be more generous with how they penalize you for wrong answers. When a test is easy, it means they're going to hit you harder for your mistakes. So I think a hard test is actually better because we, with our sacrifice plans, know we're going to have some hard questions we might have to give up on. So I can take a look and I'll make a note, but I would say it's probably the case that in the math, you just got overconfident. And was the reading any different, or was the reading, even though it felt harder, similar score?
No, I just felt like the reading was like I felt like the passages like in general and stuff, they were just like harder to read and I was like running out of time. And I usually miss 2 or 3 that I like don't have time on for those. But like, I missed 5 or like 6. I was just like, there's too much, I feel like. But that might have just been me again, like the perception thing.
Yeah, and that's going to happen, right? And so my advice is don't let it bother you in the moment. I know it's easier said than done, but like, again, when I take the test, 50% of the time I'm running out of time and have to guess on 2 questions, which for someone whose only job is taking SATs, that's a lot to not be able to finish the test. But the other half the time I'm finished and I'm pretty comfortable and I'm able to go back to things. It's just the randomness of what you get and where you tend to get stuck. But in my mind, that isn't me doing better or worse. That's just a normal variation. And so it doesn't fluster me. What would fluster me is if I got stuck in like a question. And so I'm always trying to keep moving so that I'm not like getting stuck. At a certain point with reading, I'm always like, well, I've gone as far as I can. I might be missing something in the passage. I'm going to just keep moving. and I'll place the smartest bet that I can. And sometimes when I do that a bunch of times, I'm like, uh-oh, I might be getting a lot wrong. But it turns out that when you're thinking of it as like placing a bet, your bet sometimes pays off again and again. And so you might get one of the 5 wrong that you have trouble with, but it turns out if you're using the strategies, you're placing smart bets. You might not be sure, but you're close. So I gotta run, guys. I do have one other session, but let's do this. Make sure if you have other questions, as soon as we log off here, just type them in the chat thing. I will get to it later tonight. If you want me to take a look at a particular score report for a test, I'm happy to do that. Just put it in the chat. I will do it, not this chat, because this one I think I'm going to lose as soon as I go. So Ansh, I know you have a question here. I'm going to quickly say that I do not think you should take a tap practice test
Thank
tomorrow,
you.
but if you feel like it's good, then go for it if it's not going to stress you out. But you guys are welcome. Sorry, I don't have more time to go, but yep, busy time. But like I said, put it in the chat in this thing, this here, and I will get to it later tonight.
Thanks again,
Cool.
Mike.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Love you,
guys.
bro.
Good luck. Good luck.